glad that everyone is here with us this morning as we continue our holiday mini-via called Achsni, in which we are celebrating the season of Advent, Hanukkah, Solstice, Christmas, New Year's, and Epiphany. And our theme for this mini-via is ordinary miracles, and we are celebrating the ways we encounter miracles in all of the mundane and ordinary times of our lives. You know, if I had talked to my mother about the idea of raising my consciousness, she would have looked at me like I had three heads. My good old Southern Baptist mama. If I had told her also that one of the best teachers for raising your consciousness was a fellow called Jesus, she would have kicked me out of the house for uttering such blasphemy. My mother, though, was from a different era, where they didn't even think to question consciousness, let alone what level it might be at any given moment. It's not like the idea of growing into our higher consciousness wasn't out there. I mean, Jesus, like I said, he taught it. So did the Buddha. So did Muhammad. So did all of the anonymous mystics out there before them. This concept is not new. But in our capitalistic culture that prizes individuality and competition and keeping up with the latest corporate manufactured trends, this idea of snapping ourselves out of that herd mentality is heretical and unthinkable to so many people. And when one dares to do so, to follow the ancient tradition of getting higher, we're called names, we're criticized, we're disregarded. The culture, which is created by our collective egos, by the way, hopes that shame and ridicule will bring us right back into line. We know, however, that getting higher and higher in our consciousness is the entire point of our journey in this bodily world. It is not about accumulating wealth. It is not about accumulating power or prestige. It's about remembering who we truly are and stepping into the truth while we are here, and then embodying that higher love within this world of illusion. When we are determined jubilants, when we are determined to get high, to live in a state of joy and love and peace while we are inhabiting these bodies, that's when we begin to experience miracles that are so earth-shattering that all we can manage to say is,
oh yeah.
Yeah. A month ago today, Beth and I lost one of our most precious kitty companions named Salix. He was apparently the victim of a hit and run. We really don't know. I called Salix Big White Kitty because that's exactly what he was. He was big and he was solid white. And I have a love of obvious names. And Sal loved being an indoor-outdoor kitty. And we obliged his free spirit. After we moved into our new house last March, he quickly became the neighborhood cat. It's okay, it'll be all right. Talking about cats and the dogs don't like that. Neighbors would tell me that he would visit their houses around the same time every day for head scritches, for conversation, or just to taunt their indoor cats with his free-willing lifestyle. And he had a schedule. He'd be like, let me out, it's time for me to go. And when I would walk the dogs, Salix would join us, either on the first leg of the journey or on the last, making sure that the dogs were always looking squarely at his butt as he led the pack. My pain over the loss of my big white kitty, it's still a bit fresh, of course, but I'm still just beginning to plumb the depths of the lessons that this amazing creature taught me in the 2 short years that he lived with us. The biggest lesson I think this kitty taught me in the past month, since his absence, is how to embrace joy with a whole heart. Because you see, I spent a few days blaming myself for Sal's untimely death. Not because I allowed him to go outside. I mean, yeah, that can shorten a cat's life, but it doesn't have to. My 20-year-old cat, George, was an indoor-outdoor cat for a long time, and he still lounges in the backyard these days, so it's possible to live a good life both inside and out. No, I blamed Salix's death on myself because just a day or so before it actually happened, I allowed myself to be really and truly happy. Now, I know that may not make sense to a lot of people, but here's how my usual pattern of life has gone up until this moment. Whenever I would get really happy with my life, something bad would happen. The other shoe would drop. This pattern, of course, began when I was 9 years old, living the middle-class dream with 2 parents, a house in the burbs, and everything I could ever want or imagine being handed to me. Then, my parents got divorced. My mom, my brother, and I were forced out of that middle-class lifestyle into the hardscrabble life of the federal housing projects. And I would see this pattern play out over years in my life. I'd get happy, and relationships would end. I'd get happy, and jobs would end. I'd get happy, and friends would die or leave me in some other way. I'd get happy, and the wrong person would get elected president. No matter where I looked, the pattern appeared to be repeating itself ad nauseum and without fail. And then it happened again a month ago. I got really happy, and my cat died. Right after Salix's death, the old tape started to play again. You got too happy. You brought this on yourself. Only this time was different. I stopped listening to that tape, and I had to laugh at it because I suddenly recognized this endless loop of stupidity for what it was. An old pattern that the ego had developed to keep me stuck, to keep me dissatisfied with life, so I would keep playing its pointless game of seek but do not find. Upon examination, this pattern is stupid at best and hilarious at worst. I mean, how arrogant is it, just think for a minute, how arrogant is it to think that my choice, my personal little choice to feel happy affects anything outside of me? Be it as small as a cat dying or as big as the end of democracy itself. I mean, how in the world would I have so much power over anything going on out here? In truth, things simply happen. And then we judge them as good or bad.
That was your ego.
That was my ego, it was.
Good job, Bob.
Bob's getting it.
Bob's getting it.
Bring him a cookie.
That's right. Give him a Scooby snack. He's got it.
So close to solipsism.
Yes. Yeah. What we do, say, or think about anything in this world doesn't cause anything else to happen. Things simply happen. I was seeing cause and effect where it didn't exist. I also recognized that this was a pattern that my inner child had been using for years to protect itself from pain. And here's how its logic goes. If I don't get too happy, then the bad things won't happen, and I'll be safe. And sadly, it never really worked out that well. Things I judged as bad would still happen, and then I've just spent a lifetime never allowing myself to experience true happiness. In every difficulty, A Course in Miracles says, all distress and each perplexity, Christ calls you and gently says, my sibling, choose again. This was the thought that broke me out of this loop of allowing my emotions to drag me into this abyss of misery. Trials, of course, says, are but lessons that you failed to learn presented once again. So where you made a faulty choice before, now you can make a better one and thus escape all pain that you chose before, that what you chose before has brought to you. In the past, I had chose to believe the voice that said feeling true happiness always leads to tragedy, but in this moment, I made a different choice. Allowing myself to be happy doesn't cause misery to appear. My thoughts, my ego, it's the only cause of misery around here. And I can choose to see the truth about it and to begin to purify my thoughts and let them go. Now, when I let those heavy energies go, I'm no longer weighed down by fear or by guilt or shame or any other thoughts that keep me in those lower psychological states. Instead, as teacher and author Michael Singer says, I'll go higher and higher. I will learn the secret of ascent, which is never to look down. Singer, like A Course, says we are constantly given choices in this life. We can choose to hang out with the lower states. We can choose to be in our fear. We can choose to be in our guilt or our shame or our depression or our loneliness or anything that spurs us to seek happiness outside of ourselves, or we can choose to stop looking down and release those heavy feelings and float higher and higher, upward, into our higher divine states of peace and joy and love. And that doesn't mean that we deny our lower states or say they don't exist. Those feelings are real. But what Michael Singer is saying is that we don't have to give our attention to them, and we don't have to try to arrange the world outside of us so that nothing hits them and causes us to feel pain or depression or loneliness. Instead, we acknowledge those feelings. We acknowledge that pain. We see it as the egoic defensive patterns that they represent, and we release them. We allow them to be felt, to be seen, to be experienced, and then finally released. When we feel the pain of a blockage getting hit, Singer says, that's a good thing. It's a chance to work on yourself. It didn't bring on the death of my cat, but the pain I felt gave me the chance to work with that pattern of despair, to see that it wasn't true, and to let it go. And when I let go of that blocked energy, the only thing that changed, my cat's still dead, but the only thing that changed were my feelings and the direction that they were flowing. That energy that kept me feeling weighed down released me, and we floated up together. That energy was purified, and it made me stronger instead of weaker. And this jubilance is how we get high. We feel the pain of our lower states, but we don't stick around with them and wallow in them. Instead, we recognize the gifts that they can give us when we allow them to be seen for the old useless patterns that they are. We feel their pain, but we recognize their gifts and allow them to rise up through and out of us. If we'll just allow ourselves to get one toke over the line, which is one step outside of the ego's heavy constraints into that spiritual high that we're called to live in all times, then we can hop on that divine train that takes us back home to our unity with one another and the holy. Breathe deep. In the television show Lucifer, anybody watch that one? Nah, all right. All right, well, I'm going to tell you then. In the TV show Lucifer, hell is not depicted as an eternal place of external torture in some fiery pit. Instead, it's an eternity in something called a hell loop, where you are tortured internally by your own guilt. In one scene, a man who was recently murdered was set to spend eternity in the bedroom of his luxury yacht. Now, that's not a bad setting if you consider the externals, but the never-ending torture of the guilt that he felt inside of his mind was going to make that external luxury pretty worthless really quick. In hell, Lucifer tells the hapless dead man, you are your own jailer. You brought yourself here. Yeah. With every choice we make, jubilants, we either create our own hell or our own heaven. The poor souls in Lucifer may be trapped for an eternity by their guilt, but the good news for us is we can choose again. Whenever we find ourselves in a hell of our own making, such as believing that being too happy will bring tragedy in your life, I mean, just saying it out loud, how stupid is that? How ridiculous. But I can choose again. You can choose again to release the old, useless, painful pattern and use that energy that you've been using to torture yourself to get yourself high. And which, of course, it's easier said than done. As children, we all build defenses against pain in the world, and we don't know any better. This is why we should never guilt ourselves about this, because we just don't know any better. We didn't have very much choice but to use whatever resources we had at hand to protect ourselves from a world we barely understood, let alone knew how to defend ourselves against in a healthy way for whatever traumas were coming our way. There's no blame. There is no shame for any of the patterns that you have developed over the years that you use to keep pain at bay. Those lower states, they served a purpose, and they seemed to work just fine for a while. They worked so well, in fact, that we build our entire lives on them. For example, I built a life for many, many years on a foundation of anger, on a foundation of cynicism and resentment after my father left our family. I thought I had this happy, fulfilling life, but those feelings of anger and cynicism and resentment, they never went away. How could they? That's the foundation that I have built my life on. Of course, they're still there. This is what Jesus means when he warns us not to build our lives on shifting sand. These lower energy states, these patterns that we unconsciously build our lives on to protect ourselves, they're unstable. You can't build a life on anger without it falling apart at some point. You can't build a life on loneliness and expect to not feel lonely. You can't build a life on despair and expect it to go away. That's your foundation. And you got to recognize whether you have built your life on shaking sand, shifting sand, or whether you have built your life on a rock, on those higher energetic states of love and peace and joy. So jubilance, it is time to get high. It is time to let whatever you have built on fear, whatever you have built on despair, whatever you have built on anger, let it fall. It wants to. It's always constantly shifting. So let go of that energy. Let it go. Let it fall down. All that past pain that you've used as a foundation, it's time to feel it. It's time to recognize it as the useless pattern that it is. It's time to purify it and allow it to just pass through you and transform you from that lower energy to that higher energy of peace and love and joy. That's where we build our lives now, on peace, on love, on joy. And Michael Singer gives us a handy little physical tool to use whenever we find ourselves stuck in our own hell loop, hanging out. See, the baby's in a hell loop. I'm sorry. Sorry, baby boy. So this is what you do when you just want to cry like a baby. You're hanging out in that lower state of guilt and fear or despair or loneliness. He says, take your finger. All right, this is audience participation. Take your finger and put it right between your eyebrows. Touch that third eye of peace and wisdom. And instead of physically looking down, make this a reminder to look up. To look up. The secret to ascent is to never look down. So when you feel like you're looking down, make yourself look up. It's all about choice, jubilance.
In my yard, you better be looking down.
Bob says in his yard, you better look down. Yeah. You will be in a hell loop. A stinky one, yes. Yeah, the dog knows. That's right. The dog said amen. Only in Jubilee. Jubilance, it's all about choice. You got a choice to keep looking down, hanging out in your hell loop, or you can choose again whether those hellish thoughts are where you want to be. When they start to drag you down, go, nope, I'm going to choose again. Choose to look up and allow those painful energies to be seen and healed and released so they can take you that one toke over the line, right out of the clutches of your lower egoic state into your natural, divine, higher state. Jubilance, I invite you in this moment to begin to build your house, build your life on that solid rock of love and joy and peace, and allow the shifting sands of guilt or fear or despair or loneliness to just wash away that hell loop of a life that you have created before this moment. It's true what a course says. When we choose to get high, not one part of your life will be left unhealed. We are created to be an altar of joy, jubilance. built on that solid divine rock, and no matter what kind of rain, wind, or flood comes at us from the outside world, it cannot fail. I can tell you from experience that choosing again, looking up, and allowing that lower energy to be purified and transformed, it is one of the best highs that you will ever experience in your life. So I invite you this morning, Jubilants, let us all get one toke over the line. Sweet Jesus.